Surprise! It's Two Chicks, One Book Plug Tuesday.
We're dropping in early to shine a little spotlight on a book you should absolutely know about.
Today we're giving some well-deserved love to an author who deserves a spot on your shelf.
You know the drill. Fangirling, chaos, and probably a fictional crush or two.
Let's get plot twisty! Hey everyone, and welcome back to Two Chicks and a Plot Twist.
This episode is extra exciting because we're covering our book plug of the week, and today we're talking about We Have Reached the End of Our Show by Ali Gordon, and she is here with us today.
We are so excited to have her on the podcast, so let's just go ahead and get into it. Ali, say hi, introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Ali Gordon. I am the author of We Have Reached the End of Our Show, which has been very recently published. It is my debut novel, which is very exciting. And I am an author and a comedian, and I live in Los Angeles.
Oh, that's
My
so
God,
fun.
look at her go! What? All right, well, let's go ahead. We're going to go and start talking about We Have Reached the End of Our Show, which, to begin, I will say I love the cover of this book.
Thank you.
Did you design this? Did you hire someone? Because it's like a comic strip
So
almost. It's really,
I-
really amazing.
Thank you. I'm so glad you said that. I saw this artist. Their name is Martlet. I saw them, I'm going to go ahead and say 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Remember once upon a time when we all loved Twitter and Twitter was so fun? And I thought that their work was so colorful and expressive. And it was at the time that I was still querying this novel. But, you know, I was obviously thinking about it a lot. And I was like, God, if this ever gets published, I really want them to do the cover of this book. Like, I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if I'm going to even work with a publisher who's amenable to that in the slightest. But I just put them in my bookmarks. And then when time came around and we were talking about this cover, I brought their name up, and they also, my publishers also loved their work. And so I worked with them to pick like what scenes I thought would make for evocative imagery on the front of the cover.
Right.
But then they took it from there and they helped with the color palette and things. And then also the design was done by somebody in-house with my publisher. So art was one person, and then like actual like layout and design was another. But yeah, I love it. I like
It's so impressive.
It is really cool.
It's very neat.
I was really thinking about like what makes me pick up a cover. And I gotta say, it's very rarely text on a black background. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just no
Yeah.
offense to offense to the many books that are just text on a background. But there was just something, I don't know. I just like their art really appealed to me. And they were
Yeah.
amazing to work with also, by the way. So if anybody else is thinking they should illustrate my
Right.
book cover, go for it.
No, the
Right?
cover is a win on its own and definitely eye-catching. I think you did amazing with all of that. And the
Thank you.
team, it's just gorgeous. And then we have the little description about the book, and it goes, thanks to an unrelenting cycle of cancer treatments, 32-year-old Gabe is too weak to dance gracefully on stage or through NYC's sparkling social scene like he once did. And although he and Josie have been in love for 6 years, lately Gabe's been feeling more like Josie's patient than his boyfriend. So, one day, Gabe makes a choice. He'll forego treatment and live out his remaining days on his own terms. Then, a harrowing announcement blasts over the news. 25 days until impact. And, as the world falls into chaos around him, something sparks inside Gabe for the first time in a long while. The chance for adventure. When his cousin, Lacey, shows up with a car and a plan, the three begin a journey none of them ever expected. A road trip through the end of the world.
So good.
If that's
There's
not
so much packed
attention-
in that summary.
Yes, attention grabbing. My God, to say the least. But
I know. So good.
where did you get this idea? Like, oh my gosh, what inspired you to write this?
Threads of this idea for a while before I started writing. I am very much a work on one project at a time person. I kind of wish I was more of a have 10 things open. I'm really not. If they are very different forms of media, that's fine. Like while I was editing this book, I was writing a musical. That was okay. I don't think I could have worked on 2 books at the same time. Unless you're an amazing agent who wants to give me $1 million deal, in which case, of course, I can work on 2
We'll
books at
do
the same
anything,
time.
yes.
I'll work on 8 books at the same time. Okay, but in sincerity, I don't really do that if I have the choice. And so what ends up happening to me more often than not is that I will sort of rock tumble an idea for a while and slowly something will come out of it. And so the first part of this idea, which I had at this point, let's say 7 years ago, was I liked the idea of a road trip at the end of the world. I didn't know if that should be a pilot or a graphic novel I didn't know what that could be, but I liked the idea of having, that thing of like knowing that there's a expiration date or that something terrible is going to happen.
Right.
Adding into that some sense of like urgency and movement, I just thought would be very interesting because it would take you a lot of places and you could potentially meet a lot of different people or see how other people were dealing with the end of the world. I just liked that idea. I didn't have anything to do with it, but I liked it. And then that also slowly like sprouted another wing, which was I liked the idea of knowing you were already dying at the end of the world. That just was I just thought that would make for an interesting character or an interesting perspective to get into this conflict, because something like, quote unquote, the end of the world is unimaginable in ways. And so finding ways to break that down into more manageable character ins, I thought was very necessary in order to talk about something so huge. And so that was just a perspective that interested me, of just like wondering, if you already knew your time was limited, how would you feel about finding out that everybody's time was limited?
Right.
Would that be relieving? Would it make you feel more guilty? What would that inspire you to do or say? Just sort of giving everybody the same expiration date.
Yeah.
Right.
When you previously thought you were going to have to end it a lot earlier than everybody else.
Right.
And I knew that's when I started being like, okay, so I think these two ideas are not different ideas. I think these are the same idea. And it still took longer than that to sort of get to the next thing, which was who these characters are and where this road trip would take them. But again, like I said, I do sort of like to, I was going to say meditate on an idea. That's a good analogy, but I've never meditated in my life. I just mean sort of like let the idea form and like spread, what's it called when like bacteria like split and make more of themselves?
Yeah, whatever that
something
is.
like that. Whatever that is, something like that. Like that is how I prefer to think about a narrative if I can. And since this was a solo project with no deadline, I did just kind of like let it marinate for a couple years. And basically, the more I asked questions, the more I was able to answer questions, which was like, okay, so if there is this person who is sick and knew they were going to die, what would like their job be? What would be an interesting person for this to be? And for me, that was a dancer. And I have worked in performing for a very long time, so I do know a lot of performers and am one. And so like that was an interesting perspective for me as well, was just to talk about creative people. But also, to be entirely frank, I only started writing this in 2020 because I had time because of the pandemic. And so a lot of the things I was thinking about were loss of potential.
Right.
And so that also sort of bolstered this character in my mind, because it seemed interesting to me to have someone put a lot of their worth and value and pride into something very physical that you would not be able to do if you were sick. And then, from there, it's like, okay, so if that's the main character, like who lives with them and who loves them and why do they love them? You know what I mean? Like, it's like things sort of branch off from there. And then I have to admit, once I sort of had the characters, the outline and the writing process was quick. I think once it's sort of, I knew who I wanted to go on the journey and I knew how I wanted the journey to end. And once I knew those two things, the red carpet sort of unrolled for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I think that the title itself is so cool. How did you come up with the title? Is this something you've been sitting on for the last couple of years, or was it something that as you finished the book, it kind of came to you?
I think I had the title before I finished the book, which for me is rare because I hate titling things. I hate titling things. But I was recently looking through notes just to kind of, because I was like, my baby's graduating, and I was sort of like going through the baby book tearfully. And so I found an outline, a sort of like semi-finished outline that I had been working on while I was writing, just to be like, oopsie, before I write too many pages of this, I should really make sure I know like really what's going to happen. And I had a couple different title options in that document, and we reached the end of the show, it was one of them. So I know that it came early-ish. It definitely didn't come pre-narrative, but I think it was getting there.
Right.
It's also a line of dialogue that one of the characters says in the book as part of their performance piece.
I love that.
And that also, I wish I could remember if that came before the title or if I wrote that and went, oh, no, that's the title. I wish I could remember. But I liked it because it obviously has like end in it, but has that performance element.
Right.
It feels very theatrical. That felt appropriate with who these characters are and the journey that they go on. And I also just like that the title wasn't sad, honestly. Like some of my other titles either had like double meanings that felt a little more grave. And even though the book is pretty sincere and pretty serious, I just didn't like the idea of the title promising that.
Right.
In a way. Like I didn't want it to be like, ugh, here comes my, like I gotta crack open my big sad serious book now.
Right.
So there was just something playful about it too that I liked that to me sort of took some of the sting out of being like, okay, you're going to turn over the cover and then on the back it's going to say the world ends. So like, okay, we already know we're like, I see where we're treading. I understand. But like, look at this fun playful title. Maybe there's something fun and playful about it, which I do hope is true. I hope that there's much else in the narrative that doesn't just feel like traipsing to a sad, inevitable conclusion.
Right.
Right. And given like this theme of the book, were there any scenes or characters that you found difficult to write? Because I know you said when you got the characters, it was easy to write, but is there anything particular that stands out to you and you're like, oh, that was challenging?
Yes. There is a fight in the book. Verbal, not physical.
Okay.
But there is a conflict in the book. That is maybe the only thing that I completely rewrote top to bottom more than once. Not and sometimes just completely motivated by myself, but sometimes motivated by editor notes. But it was so important to get this argument right because it is the crux of why two characters don't really like each other or see eye to eye. And we are already, this is in a flashback, so we are already introduced to them in tension. And I think you can kind of get an idea of why they're in tension. They live their lives very differently. These, without being too spoilery, it's the characters of Josie and Lisi. Josie is Gabe's boyfriend, who is like uber pragmatic and has been taking care of him for a long time, very lovingly, very dutifully. And Lisi is his more carefree younger cousin who took the news of his terminal illness very badly. This was inspired in part, not based on any particular person, but I lost both of my parents within 2 years of each other. And I met a lot of people who deal with grief and conflict very differently, which obviously really appealed to me. I don't know, appeal is a weird word to say there, but like it really interested me. I was like, wow, there are so many ways to react when you hear bad news. And so those became sort of like fundamental cornerstones of those characters. And there's an argument where it really comes to a head. And I would write it and I would be like, this isn't what they're arguing about. It's not badly written. It's not devoid of tension. It's just the wrong tension. I started the water down a drain and it started circling really fast. And once the water was gone, I realized like it went down the wrong drain. Like it's just not quite what I wanted them to fight about.
Right.
But I found that I could not start the argument and not see it through to the end before realizing it was wrong. Like I never caught myself midway. I never was like, oh, wait, here I am 3/4 of the way through. Just kidding. I had to fully write it. I had to fully commit to it. And then like come back to it the next day and go like, nope. And I think I probably rewrote it in its entirety like 3 or 4 or 5 times. Somewhere between 3 and 5 times.
Oh, wow.
Luckily, the setup and the closure were always the same. But let's say it's a 3 to 4 page pass in the middle there where I just knew it wasn't right.
Right.
So that was the hardest part of the book to write, in my opinion. Also, fighting is very difficult to write. There is a pace of a fight that when you read it and it's not right, you just know. It's very hard to explain. Like, I wish I could put my finger scientifically on why sometimes it doesn't feel right, but sometimes a person talks too much. Sometimes a person talks for too long. Sometimes a person talks not enough. There's just something about fighting that has to really capture the tempo of two people fighting. So on top of getting the fundamentals of the argument right, it also had to feel realistic in terms of like the dialogue, and then also the fever pitch that sort of gets when you start saying mean things you regret you said say. Like nobody says those things two lines in. Like you do have to sort of slowly build to a part where suddenly you're saying something you wish you could take back but you can't. All of that just led if all of those puzzle pieces were very difficult to
Right.
maneuver into the right
Wow.
positions.
So
But I also am so proud of that part. Like now when
Yeah.
I
Right.
get excited about thinking about people reading the book, because mostly I feel dread, but when I do get excited about thinking about people reading the book, I'm like, damn, I love that scene. I really
Right.
can't wait for people to read that one.
So something that you brought up earlier and something I think we should touch on was grief. And I just wanted to talk for a minute about kind of how you intersected grief but with comedy at the same
Mhm.
time. How did you do that as an author? Is that I mean grief is such a heavy topic, but then to add it in layered with comedy, it just feels very difficult for me.
Yes. It does really interest me. And I think it's simply because when you encounter a comedian or just like a really great storyteller, they're able to take these monumental, very fragile feelings and put them through a lens that sort of allows you to feel closer to it in a safe way. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just sort of being like, comedians are very good at observing things and they're very good at like framing those observations. So it's not funny to just be like, wow, a lot of weird people come out of the woodwork when your parents die, huh? You might get like a little chuckle out of that. But somebody who's truly funny is able to spin that into a really evocative story or to make an analogy of like, it's kind of like when blank, blank, blank. And then suddenly
Right.
you're laughing. And I think it's really important because it helps. I think if you have experienced it or are experiencing it, it's a really lovely tool to be like, hey, I got you. A lot of this is a lot more universal than you think. You're not alone in this. I know it
Right.
feels like you're spinning out in an empty, dark void of a universe, but like, it's cool. We got you. We're here. And I think for people who haven't experienced it, for which it seems like this like frightening obelisk of like, oh my God, someday people I love will die, which is a huge statement and is scary. Sometimes hearing somebody talk about it and talk about their experience with it or framing it in a way, or it makes you go like, it will be sad when this happens, but it is life. It is a thing people live, and it is a thing people survive, and it is a thing people can even have funny opinions on. So when it happens to me, because we like to think about death and things as if it happens to me.
Right.
But sometimes a really great storyteller or comedian can make it feel like, so when it happens to me, I have already brushed against it in a way that feels safe. Maybe I won't feel like I'm the first person who's ever had these emotions. Because it does feel like that. Every time you go through grief, it feels like you're the first and only person in the whole universe
Right.
who's ever felt that way, which is fine. And I think it also kind of healthy. So like, no offense meant if you are feeling that way. Like, I think that's like an important part of the process.
Right.
But a next important part of the process is being like, oh, wait, no, I'm not.
So, with that all being said, when readers close the book, they're done reading, what do you want them to take from the story? And what do you hope they're feeling? I know that's a loaded question.
I know it's a great question, which is why I want to answer it adequately. I really love the end of this book. Again, I'm really trying to get better at talking in an excited way about it coming out because for so long it has felt like, well, when this thing comes out, and now I'm suddenly like, uh-oh.
You're like,
Yeah.
it's almost here.
Oh, it's here.
Yes,
Yeah.
people can read it. So I'm trying to get better at being like, hey, I like this part. I like this ending. It is not, I think, an expected ending, and yet it feels extremely inevitable. And I think the reason I like that is because it feels like a teeny tiny little microcosm of like life. And like the larger thing I was really trying to capture here, which was like, it's not if life is over, it's when life is over. It's not if relationships change, it's when you know what I mean? It's like, it's all these things. And I think that the ending does capture that without necessarily putting a lovely little button on it and being like, the end. I think it does capture those feelings, those very difficult, conflicting feelings, pretty adequately. And I'm proud of it as a reflection of this like larger psychological
Right.
diatribe that I've been on. Like, I do think that the ending reflects exactly what I'm talking about in this podcast. The best compliment I've received so far is that my best friend of a decade called me after reading the book, like from his bed, still like literally having just closed it. Well, not just, because I was like, oh my God, when did you finish it? And he was like, about 10 minutes ago, but I needed 10 minutes to like lay there and just sort of like stare at the ceiling and
Right.
like just sort of shake a little bit. And then I called you. I was like, that's great, actually. Like, I would love if the feeling that people feel after closing the book is not an immediate sense of, well, I've got all my opinions formed on that. I'm like, Good.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. Great last
Right.
page. Done. Like, I would love if people have to like sit with it for a little. Like
Mhm.
Yeah,
that's
and reflect and
oh,
take
what a
it
huge
in.
compliment that would be. I've read
Yeah.
books like that where like I've gotten to the last page and sad it was over and mournful for the characters. I wish I was with them for longer and happy that and happy because I loved the book but like I really do love the idea that people won't immediately have like a tweet. Do you know what I mean? To be like, great.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
like, got that in 120 characters or less. Like done. It would be very cool if people felt conflicting ways or needed some time to sit and process it.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked about a lot of heavy stuff, so I think it's time for some fun things.
Yay, fun things.
Yay! So, you are a busy person. You've written this book. You have all these events going on, which we'll talk about here at the end. Have you read anything good? Have you had time to even read?
Yes. Okay, so I will say when I was editing, I did not read books, which sucks because, as I'm sure you do, reading's a big part of my life. And so like it was
Right.
really strange. I think I went like a 7-month period where I didn't really
Wow.
read. I maybe kind of cracked a couple books but didn't finish any. I just was not really paying attention to them. Basically
Right.
what was happening is because I was editing, anytime I read a good sentence, I was just being like, damn, wish I wrote that sentence. You know what I mean? Like or like a character
Right.
would start experiencing something and I'd go like, did I manage to capture that in this way? Like,
Right.
that's like such a lovely way of experiencing shock. Like, I wonder, and they'd like have to go back to my manuscript and be like, do I ever have a moment of shock in here? Did I do a good job? Like, so reading was not happening for me. And then the minute I sent in my final thing to like be proofread, I was like suddenly like, whoa, reading. Reading's great. So I've actually been on like a huge kick of reading and I've read a couple great things. The thing that really knocked my socks off that I think is I don't like see it on Book Talk and stuff a lot, which is why I want to highlight it, is Everyone Knows Your Mother's a Witch by Rivka Galchen.
Ooh, that sounds good. I haven't heard of
It's
that one.
excellent. It's so good. I want more people to read it. I thought it was sensitive and beautifully written and honestly pretty funny. And something that I really admire about it is that it takes place in like the 1400s. And it still manages to find comedic moments, but they are not anachronistic or wink winky. Do you know what I mean? Like
Right.
nothing about the comedy feels like this is somebody in the year, let's say 2023, writing this book. You know, like this is a
Right.
joke about feminism through a 2023 lens, right? Like it's like all of the funny observations and the funny ways that the characters act are all so realistic and feel really, really true to the time period. I just admired that so much. And I do think that like when I'm thinking about this as a comedian, I think that's doubly hard because it's so easy to immediately make characters think, behave, react in a way that just feels like kind of real lifey. And it's so much more difficult to maintain that like integrity in a period piece. So it's wonderful. I just like that book. I think the book is great.
Well, we'll have to read it.
Like we've all said, you are a very busy person. But can readers expect anything from you in the near future? Anything new?
Yeah. Well, you know, now that this is done, I really do need to start thinking about another book,
Mm-hmm.
which is crazy.
Right.
It's so
Yeah.
wild to me that like the minute it's done, people are like, cool, what next?
Right.
I know.
Yep.
So I do really need to start very sincerely thinking about that. The other thing that I do is I write musicals. Have 2 musicals I've written with the same writing partner. Her name is Angela Parrish. She's so wonderful. I am a book writer and a lyricist. I'm not a composer. She is a phenomenal composer. And something that I am just so psyched about like this calendar year of like 2025 going into 2026 is I wrote a musical called Power Trip, which is a fantasy comedy musical intended for high schoolers. Like I wrote it to be like the musical you can do in your high school when you have a cast of 6 or a cast of 40 and you want it to be fun. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Like something that feels like a freewheeling D&D campaign. And I've workshopped it before. I've workshopped it with adults because, you know, spoiler alert, adults are my friends and not teenagers. So like, you know, when I'm like, hey, can you lend me your talents? I'm not talking to kids. But of course, my intention was always for it to be for teenagers. And I have 2 high schools doing it this year, like as their school
Oh, that's
shows.
so cool. So before we go, we talked earlier, you have some events coming up. Tell everyone what you're going to be doing over the next few months.
Yeah. If you are listening to this now, unfortunately, you missed some book events in Los Angeles and New York. But good news. If what I'm about to say sounds interesting to you, I've got one coming up in Chicago. I'm doing some book launch events at some bookstores and some like communities where I've like lived, worked, know that I know some people who'll be
Right.
interested in coming. And I have invited some comedians and storytellers and musicians to come talk about moments that feel like the end of a world. So sometimes that is grief, but it could also just be like monumental change, breakups, divorces, finding out a secret, things that truly feel like apocalyptic at the time. The reasoning for that being that when I was going through my own grief, I felt like it was the end of the world. And
everyone has a moment like that too.
Yes. And I never said it out loud because I was embarrassed by how selfish it almost seemed to be like, well, because I'm going through grief, the world is over. But also it like felt like such like, Freudian baby id emotions. Do you know what I mean? That thing of like,
Right.
oh my God, it's over. So I never really expressed it. And the only thing that I've realized and felt more affirmed in the longer I've been living with grief is how much I was like, wait, my world did end. There was a world as I knew it. And then one day there wasn't a world as I knew it.
Right.
So it doesn't mean that everybody died, but it was so silly for me to like refuse to engage with this thing that felt so true to me, which was like, my world's over. When in reality, my world was over. And I have found that to be so true for so many people. And again, not only about grief or death, but about many things that like one day your life is one way and the next day your life is another way. And you can mourn for the life the way that it was. So if you are in or around the Chicago area, on Tuesday, October 21st, I am doing a book launch event at Volumes Book Cafe in Wicker Park. I have got two incredible comedians coming, Jamie Schreiner and Brendan Tran. And then I will be there also, so I'll sign some books and we'll chat. And if you do have questions, of course, like I'm not like anti-Q&A. I'm just sort of anti taking up an hour of your time with Q&A. So, if you read the book and you like it or you even want to just talk about the end of your world or whatever, please come meet me there. I sincerely hope to keep doing this because I'm hoping it will be a very fun evening where we get to hear a lot of different voices. I also I'm putting this out there just in case someone's listening who can make this happen. I feel like this would be so fun on college campuses with the invited performers being current students.
Yeah.
Right.
Who
Gosh.
have an essay or they're like, listen to the moth and they were like, I want to do the moth. Like, it's like, here you are. Here's your first moth. Like, go ahead.
Wow. That sounds amazing. And go ahead and let everyone know where can they find you, stay in touch with you, keep up with you, social media, everything.
You can find me on Instagram at Miss Alice Nutting. That's MSALICENUTTING. I've then committed the cardinal sin of not having the same username other places because I didn't know. I just kind of didn't. I was like, I'm not going to be on TikTok. So when I made a TikTok account, I made it under the username One and Only Rat Boy. So you can find me on TikTok at One and Only Rat Boy. I don't know. Maybe I'll change it someday. I have a website, which is whatdoesallygordondO.com. Because it answers the question, what does Allie Gordon do? So if you can't remember those other things, remember that one. There's ways to contact me there, and I'll tell you about my musicals, my novels, my million other things.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We absolutely loved having you.
Thank you.
You sound like such a busy, successful person, and you are just inspiring to watch online.
Thank
your
you.
social media, everything, the books, like you're branching out. And you're showing everyone that nothing is impossible if you just put your mind to it.
It isn't exactly what I thought I was going to be doing when I was a 20-year-old. So that is what I want people to know or hear is just like, don't dream small, dream big, try it all. Who cares? Life is long, ideally. And even if it isn't, at least you fucking tried something.
Yes.
Yeah. Allie, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. It was so fun to hear about. We have reached the end of our show, your writing journey, and everything that went into bringing this story to life.
If you want to check out We Have Reached the End of Our Show, we'll have all of Allie's links in the show notes so you can follow her, support her, and of course, grab the book.
And don't forget, we'll be back Thursday with another episode. Make sure you're following us so you don't miss it. Bye!
Bye!
Yay!
Good outro. Really solid outro.